Hey, so I did my leadership interview on my dad, Brett Haswell. He attended the Air Force Academy right out of high school and received a bachelor's degree in structural engineering, and then later received a master's degree in electrical engineering and chip design. He was in the Air Force for 26 years, but before he retired, he was the colonel and commander of the 325th Maintenance Group. So in this position, he was the commanding officer for a 1,400-person organization that fixed and flew jets in the Air Force. When he retired, he started working for Lockheed Martin, and his current title is the Director for F-22 and F-16 Field and Depot Operations. And so for this organization, he's the leader of customer support and the modification team that assists the Air Force in fixing and flying these jets. So part of the reason I wanted to interview him because he's got a lot of different leadership positions within kind of the same field, if that makes sense. Kind of something that was interesting that I found when we were interviewing him was the fact that his interview or his leadership style and my leadership style are very similar, which it makes sense obviously because he was instilled with all these morals and values and work ethic when he was growing up that he definitely instilled in me, and I think that was just kind of interesting just because we've never really spoken about this type of thing. Like, we never really spoken specifically about his leadership style, but I think the fact that we had the same one is very interesting. When he was younger, a lot of his work ethic came from his family. His dad was very involved in the community, very hardworking. He was a volunteer firefighter for over 60 years, was a Boy Scout leader for over 15 years, so I think that was big influences his life. His brother was also in the military. He was in the U.S. Army and he attended West Point. And then later on he decided to go a different career path, and he's now a doctor. So I think his family was a huge part in kind of instilling that strong work ethic within him. One of the main people that stuck out to him was his first boss in the Air Force, Jim Martin. And I think in the military, a lot of times the people of lower ranks are kind of pushed to the side and not really thought about. But Mr. Martin really went out of his way to sit my dad down and say, okay, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you want your career to go in the future? What are some opportunities that can get you there? So I think he was a huge influence in my dad's life. My dad's main theory when it comes to leadership is kind of taking that collaborative approach and recognizing that he has weaknesses as well, and using people around him to kind of make up for that, and being able to use that to make the most educated decision possible is kind of the approach that he uses, and I think that's especially important in the corporate world he lives in now, but was not necessarily as important within the Air Force just because he was so technically competent as far as his specific job goes, just because he kind of worked his way up within it. But now in the corporate world, he kind of has a broader perspective of ideas, and so using those people around you is especially important now. One of the most challenging moments that kind of stuck out in his mind was his transition from the Air Force actually into the corporate world. Several leaders within his new job were pretty resistant to Mr. Haswell's ideas just because he had such a strong background within the Air Force, which is the client of now his job. And so I think they kind of viewed his opinions as being strictly from the Air Force and not from the corporate aspect of it, and he kind of had to move around that and kind of prove to them that, okay, I'm here for both sides of it. I'm here to just kind of speak the mind of the Air Force and kind of see what their perspective would be on the situation, but I'm also on y'all's side. So I think that was a big transition for him, was kind of seeing that. I think being in the Air Force and having to move every 2 years was extremely beneficial for Mr. Haswell to kind of form that leadership style that he has now. He got to see so many different leaders, some that he absolutely did not like. They were very rude, very blunt, very brash, kind of anything that you would say or do was in their way. And so he saw that, and he obviously strayed away from that, but he also saw these people who, sat him down and let him make himself something else, and really were helpful when it comes to like different aspects of their career. And so I think he kind of saw what he didn't want to do and saw what he did want to do and made his own style based on that. When it comes to Mr. Haswell's definition of success, it's pretty simple. He believes that having a healthy, happy family and friends and maintaining those relationships can bring you a lot amount of joy in the future. He says at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to wish you wanted to work more. And so he thinks that, being able to sit back and realize the people that you've influenced and the people that you have around you, and making sure those are extremely important is what all life's all about. He really tried to maintain balance between his work life and home life. Every day he would try and get out of the office by a specific time, tries not to do work at home. Obviously, this is better said than done, but it was important for him to do. One of his biggest suggestions was that each person find something they're passionate about. What's the saying of, if you find something you like, you'll never work a day in your life. And so he really believes that if you do something that you truly love, you won't be working. You'll just be doing something throughout the day. So that was a big part of his finding something that he loves to do at the end of the day. His legacy that he hopes to leave behind was the one that is positive. He hopes he's remembered for his contributions, for his service in his country, and he hopes he's remembered as building a foundation of a happy family that never stops growing. So I think that was really cool to see, what my dad really wants to have at the end of the day. That was neat. As far as the experience of this interview goes, I think it was really cool to just see the background that my dad had growing up and throughout his entire career, and seeing that just because we've never really talked about it, I think it's important to really almost interview everyone in your family. I think after doing this, I really want to get to know more of the impacts that my mother went through and how that formed her leadership style and maybe other people in my family. So I think this was a really cool experience of just kind of digging deep and learning how other people were influenced along their leadership journey.